So the title of my talk this morning is Buddhisms in the plural. There are many Buddhisms, not one Buddhism. It was stated just this way at the online workshop I took recently. I really resonated with these words. There was a strong yes in me when I heard them. Something about them felt freeing. So, as we do, I went and looked online, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I found this really interesting PDF, and it was called Buddhism, a supplemental resource for grade 12 world religions, a Canadian perspective. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. From ancient times to the present, there have been diverse schools of Buddhism that reflect the various institutional and doctrinal divisions. The classification and descriptions of these divisions or schools, their doctrines, and their philosophical or cultural aspects have been vague and interpreted in many ways due to, perhaps, the existence of thousands of different sects, subsects, movements, and so on that have made up or currently make up the whole of what we call the Buddhist tradition. This diversity extends to the scriptures and sacred texts that are used or recognized by various sects or schools. Buddhists do not have a universally agreed upon collection or version of scriptures. However, there are three separate canons or collection of Buddhist scriptures that are generally and recognized and used by the three main branches of Buddhism today. These are the Pali Canon, the Chinese canon, and the Tibetan canon. So we draw mostly from the Pali Canon, which is huge. It has so many suttas in it. I should have looked up the number of suttas, thousands. Who could ever teach all of those? So, and we live in these times when we're exposed to these many Buddhisms, and in so many ways, through books. When I first started practicing Buddhism, there were very few books available. And in fact, I chose to work at a spiritual bookstore so I could know about and purchase books on meditation and Buddhism as soon as they were published. It was a small section of the bookstore. Now if you put them all together, it would fill more than a bookstore, I'm sure. Now, of course, there's the internet and so many resources, more posts, blogs, articles than anyone could ever read, more podcasts than anyone could ever listen to, and more YouTubes than one could ever watch. And I'm sure I'm leaving out things. Oh, there's so much on social media, of course. So I checked on this. And here in Portland, Oregon, where I live, and where Pine Street Sangha lives, there are 44 group members of the Northwest Dharma Association. And I kind of suspect that doesn't include most of the Asian Sanghas. Just think of how many practice sessions there are each week, more than anyone could attend. And then if they wanted to attend more than just from those 44 group members, they could go online. And oh my God, could never listen to them all. They're happening at the same time. It's just, again, I often go back to this, but think what it might have been like at the time of the Buddha, when there were neither books, no written word, and of course, no internet. The teachings of the Buddha had to spread by word of mouth. So it began as a very relational practice, people talking to the Buddha, people talking to one another. And probably most Buddhist Sanghas have a relational element, though differently from one another. Here at Reflective Meditation, we're strongly rooted in relationships, though that is a whole other Dharma talk. In a book published in 2003, entitled One Dharma, Joseph Goldstein searches for the essential point common in all Buddhisms. He states that, quote, in emerging Western Buddhism, the method is mindfulness, the expression is compassion, and the essence of wisdom. And just notice he's just taking out a part of what's going on here in the US with Western Buddhism. And then he quotes, wisdom is not something we get and then have forever, Rather, it is something we need to nourish and develop in our lives. So I like those quotes. That's why I chose them. Um, but there are other lines in the book that I didn't agree with. Maybe that's the search for one Dharma, might be finding the teachings and directions that we can all agree with. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is one Dharma. Though there is something else. When I find myself in the presence of long-term dedicated Buddhist practitioners, I do feel something in common. I felt this when I just took this online course that seemed to attract long-term practitioners and teachers. It wasn't stated that way, but the content it seemed to attract that. I feel it when I attend Northwest Dharma Association teachers meetings. What is it? What do I feel in common? Well, the truth of the matter is I'm not really sure. This is my first stab or best guess at the moment. There's some kind of way we listen deeply to one another and ourselves. There's some kind of caring. And yeah, I hear wisdom, but it's not that kind of know-it-all wisdom. Something else, which it's hard to put words on. And I'm sure there's other qualities. And of course, there's exceptions. Not all practitioners and teachers are like this. But maybe many of us are in similar places. I don't know if this is true, internally or relationally. I'm not sure about that. It's more this feeling quality I perceive. That's why I keep going to these things. It feels good, or part of why I go to them. So here's an important question in my mind. How might that change our views and perspectives if we just accept that there are many Buddhisms, not one? For one, we would abandon trying to find a Dharma points that we all agree on, and but we would agree that there are many Dharma points and that there's value in these different practices and perspectives. Maybe we would question if we're even on the same path, whatever that metaphor might mean. But hopefully accept that there are many paths within many traditions. And hopefully, though this is a challenge, become more accepting and tolerant of other paths. So instead of trying to say we're all the same, using a common line, respect the diversity. And no doubt there are many more perspectives and understandings that could fully answer this question, which again is, how do we change our view if we accept that there are many Buddhisms? So then I wonder, why was the statement that there is not one Buddhism, but there are many Buddhisms feel so freeing to me? I'm not sure again. But there's a kind of experiential quality, an internal quality that I feel when I hear something that feels like truth to me. And I think this is why I've chosen and dedicated myself to reflective meditation. This is the form of Buddhism that feels right to me, not right to everybody. Surely that's why we have a small Sangha or part of it. And I know, I perceive that I've garnered many kinds of freedoms with a small f, freedoms from this process and from the teachings that we prioritize. So at that point, I'm going to end my talk. And